Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavors of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction, tech, or weekly Global Passive House Showcase webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Passive House podcast. Matthew Cutler-Welsh here. I'm coming from Auckland, New Zealand, and welcoming back with us this week, Ilka and Mary James, along with Zach. So we've got another great interview from you two to this week, which is really special guests stepping outside of the US, getting a bit of a international flavour. So we'll get stuck into that, but let's have a quick shout out to our sponsors, Zach, before we get underway.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxtingui Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minutair All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, RDH Building Science, Rockwool North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Our champion sponsors are Icon Windows and Doors and SIGA, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So a big thank you to our sponsors for making the podcast possible.
Awesome. Mary Oka, I'm not sure who wants to take the lead here. Do you want to tell us about your guest this week?
Yeah, so we connected with Sayo Okada, and she is originally from Japan and studied architecture here in the US and lived here for 20 years and just moved back to Japan and is basically taking Passive House with her.
Awesome. And I think you caught up with her recently at a conference.
Virtually, yes.
Virtually, as we do these days. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then connected and followed that up with this interview, which was great. So we might as well just get straight into it, because it's she does a pretty good job of introducing herself and her background. So here's the interview, and we'll come back and have a chat about it afterwards.
Welcome, Sayo Okada. You're a consultant with your own firm, and it's great to have you as a guest with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you were just mentioning that you moved back to Japan in January after being in the US to study and practice architecture for roughly 20 years. So what prompted you and your family's return to Japan, and which part of Japan are you living in?
So it's mainly I moved because my father had a health issue, and it just, for me, I felt like it's time for me to move. And my kids are in the age where before the kindergarten started. So timing wise, I felt like it was the right timing to move and wanted to be with my family for, recovering from the health issue that he's facing. So, yeah. And I'm in Nara, Japan. If you know Kyoto and Osaka, that, the south of Kyoto is where I'm at. That's where I grew up.
Great. So you got interested in Passive House when you were in the United States.
Yeah.
And as many people did, you got interested in Passive House in the kind of quieter time in the design and construction industry in 2007, 2008. How about in Japan? Can you talk a little bit about what the interest is there in building efficiency generally and Passive House in specific?
I think there is some people who are interested, but not as many as US. the some people say like in Japan, people like insulate themselves, like living in an insulated house. Like they're more like our culture sort of like teach you to relate more than like, if it's cold, just wear more clothes, or but also like we had the mini split like 40 years, 50 years, and we been heating and cooling that room that you're in. So I think a lot of people feels like it's a waste of money to heat and cool the whole house. And then also it's our climate is, most of the area that people, a lot of populations are in is a mild climate. Like in the US, it's like climate 3 is mostly where people live in. So it's there. We don't have extreme cold weather. People want to insulate more. So maybe that's where that come from. What's happening now is that government is pushing low energy buildings. Ultimately, the passive house will be one of the standard that people is going to look coming years.
So how did you get interested in passive house when you were in the US?
I think I was so I didn't have a job 2007 and 8, so I was looking for something to add to my resume initially. So I was looking for a job, and there was a job that are doing retrofit projects in Boston area, and that the construction company that I was at had an interest in, the owner interested in a passive house. So I started to look for the training, and then happened to be one in Boston, and I kind of jumped on that training. And I think it was 2010, 11-ish. And Katrin was teaching, and I feel like I made a lot of connection or get to know people who are now actively doing a lot of projects in the Massachusetts area or working in the policy making for Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. And now you're actually working with Katrin and Fias to bring the passive house standard to Japan, right?
Yeah. It's one of the exciting things that I am working right now. We just went through first passive house courses in Japan, and we just had 5 people pass the exam. So it was a lot of work, like translating, English to Japanese is one thing, but like a whole unit is different. That, all the details that are, developed in the States are, 2x4 doesn't really exist in Japan. So they're, what do we do about this, or about the systems? It's different, boiler, the hydronic systems aren't popular here, or like forced air system aren't popular here to begin with. So what we always had mini split. So it was the content needed to adjust to Japan. So it was a little tricky, but it went well. And we're planning to host another training early next year. And working with Kat and Lisa and see where we can adjust our training and our protocol to fit better in Japanese cultures and especially climate.
And also building construction type, right?
Yeah, it is very different. Yeah. There we have a specific, wood constructions, especially for residential. It has a very different, structurally, and how they build stuff is different. So I'm working with a couple builders to see what we can do to build sort of like detail, like a standard details, so that it kind of gets adapted smoother than it's definitely a work in progress.
So how is it different from our wood construction here?
It's more like a timber construction, but it's hard to explain it. They let's see. So the roof area where wood and a wall and roof connects. The aesthetically, people wants to extend that roof rafter, connecting to outside, and that make it very difficult to air seal and insulate, which it's a similar scenario in the U.S., but that aesthetic is very particular to Japan, and that poses a lot of challenges in retrofit as well. And this foundation and wood foundation and wall connections are slightly different. It's definitely can be done. It's just a regular practice. It's the carpenter do this way is different from what PHIJP requires, and it's just a little like a modification to fit to the everyday practice is a little tricky without a builder's help. So
yeah, in addition to those construction details, which it'll be really interesting to see when you figure those out. You had brought up retrofit versus new construction. Do you have a sense of what percentage of building industry is retrofit versus new construction in Japan? Like, are there?
I think it's more new constructions are popular. I think the main reason that I see more new constructions happening is that a couple of things. I think we have a earthquake that newer constructions are more stronger against a earthquake. So when you retrofit, you have to you have to look at the structural integrity, whether it will meet earthquake standard, and people wants to have stronger house to against the earthquake. So that's one. And when I was working in the US, that is a retrofitting a single family. When you buy a house, say like 10 years ago in Boston, your value of the house goes up, right? Like the house, the land value and house value goes up. In Japan, it significantly goes down. So you can't really resell the house with profit. So it's a very different real estate market. Like for instance, when my parents built this house for say I think it was like 200,000. I think this will be only can sell like maybe like I don't know like a less than 10,000. Like that value goes down significantly. Like we just looked at a house, pretty big house, like built in early 1900, and one of our clients is looking at this house to renovate, and she can get this house for 30,000, and it's a pretty like that just goes down significantly for older house. So it's not a value building business sort of. So that retrofit is not, if it costs say like 200,000 to renovate retrofit the buildings, might as well build a new house. So that's the mindset that a lot of people has. It's unfortunate, and I think it needs to change because the retrofitting is most one of the big part of the lowering the carbon as a whole. But it's a bigger issue comes with it from the real estate market point of view.
So interesting, because you'd almost think it would be the opposite, right? Because if you get already a house for not a lot of money, you already have something, and then you put more in. Of course, you don't increase the value by much, but if you buy a new house, you already decrease it right away once you move in, right? It's almost like
exactly
like car value.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
like a car value. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how do you go about, like you're talking about the builders, they're just not used to all these like new details, right? That you're figuring out with Passive House and working through probably with building scientists as well, right? To see if everything works. How do you go about convincing the contractors to actually do this and try this? Is there quite a bit of outreach, or do you just kind of start with the consultants first and then go from there?
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go. The builders are skilled here, so I don't think we need to convince them as long as the details work. So I think I think we need to make sure that the things are going to work out first before we kind of, do this kind of like, so I want to make sure that the builders that I work with to set that the Japanese detail standard first before we can match out and do stuff that is going to work here. But yeah, it's a lot of legwork, but it's an important one to smooth transitions. As far as a building scientist, what I've been working with on with the building scientists is that the one thing I noticed is that the culture, the lifestyle here is different from Germany, US. We take a bath every day, and that creates a lot of moisture. And we cook rice every day. We do a lot of hot pot in the winter. So there's a lot more moisture and a lot of hot water use is happening. So, having that wall assembly, whether that, membrane location, membrane types, how much insulation is needed. And the PS has this assembly guidelines in the guidebook that I've been working with the professor to see, the building scientist professor, to see whether that guideline actually works and can be translated in Japanese standard. So that I feel like one of the big things here and important things, because it's very humid here too. So, and we have a long rainy season in June and July, and that's not really accounted for, I don't think, in that wall assembly guideline. But it may work, right? Like it might work as it is, but I just want to make sure that it's working in this climate and culture.
So do you use Woofy Passive to do that, or do you have different kind of software in Japan?
So the building scientist I work with using the Woofy Pro, and we have a good connection with one of the engineer in Fraunhofer, who is a Japanese woman, and so we are working with the Germany's and US and here to work on this standard. So Woofy Pro has been, she's been kind of adding the Japanese membranes and insulation materials and all the building materials to that Woofy Pro, and we can analyze it.
That's great. And I guess dehumidification is probably something that's more common there.
Yeah.
As
right.
Part of your HVAC system, you have dehumidification in many.
Yeah, for the rainy season, yes, but mostly, AC is used for dehumidification, that recirculating through that air conditioning system. And it's only, I'm not talking about passive house, but I'm talking about the regular living conditions. AC's in one room, like per room we have mini split. So it's not like we're treating the whole house, humidities yet. So in the passive house scenarios, it's a little different because we only need, for heating and cooling wise, we need little amount of mini split energy, like, BTU. However, dehumidification may not, the dehumidification, capacity may not be catching up with what's going on inside.
And centralized ventilation also probably is not so common there. No. So
we don't, they don't talk about the ventilation much. Open the windows.
Yeah, so I guess that would be my next question. Like, how does the passive house targets and goals work with the local building code? Because here I feel like, passive house has to work with ASHRAE and all these codes. How is that in Japan?
I think I haven't built one, like a certified, I've done a certification, like one, and then on the process one, but I don't think we had any issue with the code requirements, because I think the states had more specific ventilation requirements, and the other requirements that you needed to work with a code official, but it's much looser. Like, I don't find it as hard to work with in that building code wise. A building official may have an issue in certain things, but the code wise, I don't think that much of an issue. I may not know that part yet, but.
So you had mentioned before that your just the way you cook is different too, right? That you kind of need kitchen exhaust as well.
Yeah.
Is that a code for you?
It's I think it is a code, but like in general, people wants to not recirculate that ventilation air. They want to get that out. So we have this hood system that you exhaust, and that exhaust system will come automatically make up the air. So automatic, like simultaneous makeup air comes in. So we have that system. So that's the one part I wish the US had, that ventilation system.
Yeah, definitely.
So it sounds like in some ways, there are some systems or appliances that are available to you in Japan that will make it easier to implement passive standard.
Yeah, I mean, the Mitsubishi's like heat pump system it's all mechanical wise, it's all here. Like the domestic hot water, very efficient ones here. It's just the building envelope isn't there yet. Like a blower door, like the one thing that I'm going to have a hard time to implement this is the blower door equipment isn't here. Like there is very little. Like it's here. Like some people, I know 2 companies has them, like at the consultants, but having that to be so like a regular practice is going to be difficult because we didn't have that Hertz radar culture here. Like in the US, there was a Hertz radar there before Pascals came in. So,
do you have any sense of what the average building air tightness is in Japan?
The newer concessions are, much tighter because they use the membranes. But like, I don't know if this house has like 10, I will be amazed. 10 ACH.
Yeah, natural ventilation.
Natural ventilation, yeah.
So the membranes, are they the same that we have here, like the same products?
Yeah, similar. Mm-hmm. Yeah, PHIJP is here. PHIJP has a smart PHIJP membrane that doesn't happen in the US, I don't think. Yeah, there's here similar smart membranes here too, and we started to see that happening here too. So there, people are starting to look at the airtightness here too.
Mm-hmm. You haven't worked on any passive house projects, hired to develop passive house projects yet in Japan?
I'm working. I did one in Yokohama, which is a 2015, and then I am working on one that is trying to certify, but I haven't worked on recently yet. But there's a couple potential projects is coming in. Hasn't started the design yet, but the clients are interested.
And how did they hear about you?
I think that the people who I is part of this like a group of people that are interested in passive houses talking to me, and then through that one of the certified passive house project in Yokohama, they started to hear about me, and then kind of like words of mouth, not actual marketing or anything like that yet.
And is this a group through which you offer classes as well?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how's the interest in becoming certified passive house consultants?
I think the it's growing. There were interest, but it's still small. And the people who took the course, they said it's very difficult, like very hard materials to. And but there's some interest. Not a huge like US yet.
And you are continuing to work on passive house projects in the US?
Yeah. I'm doing it. Both. Yes. Yeah. I work for the firm Studio G Architects in Boston, and I was a project manager there, and now I work on a couple projects for a couple project which is seeking passive house certification, and one of the projects that I actively working on is the City of Boston's Energy Positive project. So I've been doing a lot of passive modelings, and then we're working on the construction documents right now. So I'm marking up the details and doing a therm. So it's great that there's a lot of projects coming in Boston that is seeking a passive house certification. So it's fun to do. In Japan, there's not much going on, so I kind of learning a lot about keep learning about passive house for the project in the States, and it's fortunate that I still work with them.
So for those who aren't familiar with that program in Boston, can you tell us a little more about that?
Oh, there was a competition that was there was a competition that City of Boston were looking for a developer team to develop a energy positive multifamily projects, and it has to be energy positive, and then the on that lot that City of Boston is offering. So we won one of the lots. So we're developing the 23 units multifamily, and it's the low income housing. And I don't want to talk there's it's a co-op program. So there's some financial like a structure that that is developer is offering so that it's affordable, and in the so energy positive, and then so that project is part of the program, multifamily program for a living building challenge as well. It wasn't part of the City of Boston requirement, but it is now looking at like what can be done to certify through the living building challenge, like multifamily like that. So so that's the program that I'm working on, and should be breaking the ground next fall, if I'm not
So it really sounds like you have your hands pretty full, huh?
Yeah. When I wake up, I have a lot of emails to read.
Well, in addition to having children too, as well, right?
Yeah. They're 6 and 3, so it's definitely a handful. But it's good because they're the grandparents are here, and they I feel like they have a lot of more fun than in the US because I was the only one at the house. I mean, my husband too. But yeah, it's fun to work with a lot of different type of projects.
So is it similar working as a woman as an architect in Japan than it was in the States, or are there differences?
I think there is the differences in as far as like status as a woman here. I don't work as an architect here because I don't have a license or anything. However, they still have the women is so like take care of the house and take care of the children's all the daily needs. And then man goes to work and they come home late, and then things are kind of like ready. So when women works, it kind of gets that whole like who's going to take care of the house, who's going to take care of the kids, and when kids get sick, who's going to go and take care of that, take the kids to the doctor. So I don't feel it that hard to be a woman here because I'm sort of half American. That as an adult, I grew up as an adult in the U.S. So I don't feel like I am suppressed. And my husband's from the States, so we kind of have an understanding that we both has life that wants to do professional pressure work work in both ways, and then we both take care of kids. So, but I think it's still hard for a lot of women to work outside and full time.
So that sounds like you probably don't work with a lot of women on projects.
I don't, and there's a lot of interest in sustainability from women's architect, and I started to kind of connect with those the women architects here. That is very interesting. That they care about their what the children's going to go through in the future, so they're more motivated. I feel like. So started to be connected to that women architect, but I wish to do that more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we see this also in the United States, that there's a slightly greater tendency for women architects to be more committed to sustainable architecture. Not obviously it's not a black and white division, but but there is a tendency in that. Speaking of women architects, I understand that there's Miwa Mori of Key Architects, that she has worked on a couple of Passive House projects in Japan. Have you networked with her?
Yeah, I haven't met her yet. I'm planning. I would like to meet her and work with her because she has more experience here in Japan, and so I'd like to meet with her. But it's kind of like I'm friend with Facebook, but that's about it. And I know a lot of people that knows Mori-san, and then we have a common friends, but I haven't actually met her yet. No. The COVID is kind of having me stay in this area a little bit more than I want to. So yeah, she's in like 3 hours away by train, so it's closer than States, but it's definitely things I would like to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about this group of women, or in general people that are interested in sustainability. Are there any other kind of certifications or green kind of certification that are popular in Japan besides now Passive House?
Yeah, there's a LEED like the standard here as well, and the CASP is one, and I don't know much about it yet, so I'd like to learn that, and apparently it is more accustomed to the Japanese, irregular building practice, so I'd like to study that. And I do have I'm doing a consultant work for like a larger buildings, like high rise buildings for LEED and LEED certification. And there's a lot of interest in a larger commercial building in LEED and WELL right now. So it's probably going to take off in coming years because government is pushing a low carbon society. So, but the LEED and WELL, works with the pastels. So as far as indoor air qualities and all the energy use, so definitely can work with that standard for larger buildings. But for residential wise, I don't think there's like specific like green certification. There's like sort of like a path to meet certain standard that is the building envelope standard there is. So I'm interested in learning that what they call it H20, that H20, a G20, a G30 is a standard that is building envelope standard. So I would like to kind of like work with that standard as well. So there's a lot to learn.
It might be a really good guideline as you develop the new parameters for FEES certification.
Yeah.
Spain,
Right.
What brought you to the United States in the first place? I never asked you that.
I just wanted to study English for a year.
That's actually how I ended up there too.
There we go. And ended up going to an architecture school and meet someone and marry there. And there we go. 20 years passed.
Decisions that change our lives.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot of choices there. And I picked the one and then ended up being in the States for 20.
Was there, when you decided to come here, was there any part of that decision that was because there were kind of restricted pathways for you in Japan as a woman?
Yeah, I think so. I wanted to. I left Japan when I was 18. So it's like, part of it's like, teenager mind, like, I want to get out, like I want to do new things and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it's sort of like break from, the course of, okay, you graduate high school and then you go to, college or you go to work. And I wanted to break from that path and wanted to see, outside of Japan. And I knew from the, watching movies, I'm like, oh, it looks like it's a fun place to go,
And how did you get interested in architecture once you got here?
I studied psychology at the freshman and just could not. It was difficult materials to study when you don't speak English much. But my father is a carpenter, so I always be involved in sweeping the floor of the construction site. So I always with them. And when I was little, I was going to the construction site more often. So that this house was built by him. I was looking at how he built the building. So I think when I was like looking for other things to do after, I was like, psychology is not my things. Like, oh, maybe I want to become an architect. And my father definitely did not want me to be an architect.
Where did you go to school then?
I went to Wentworth Institute, which I teach PHIJP course now. But I went to school in Boston.
Great. Well, it's great that you were able to find a way to pursue a career that interested you.
Yeah. I feel like I made a right choice.
Yeah, and good luck with bringing Passive House to Japan.
Thank you.
It's very exciting.
There's a challenge for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a challenge for sure.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was fun talking to you.
All right, and that was Sayo Okada coming to us from Japan. Thank you, Ilka and Mary, for bringing us that interview. Let's go to you two first. Mary, what stood out for you from that interview?
Well, it was just exciting to hear that she's bringing Passive House FIA's standard to Japan and working with and doing training of Passive House designers there. And also trying to figure out what works in Japan as Passive House standard. I thought it was really interesting talking about the cultural differences around comfort, as just the beginning of trying to adjust. What does the Passive House standard mean in Japan?
I can definitely relate to that cultural challenge of people thinking that it's just okay to put on another layer of clothing, and being cold is just you just put up with it. We have a lot of that both in New Zealand and Australia, and it's quite a challenge. It's sort of ingrained in people that's just the way things are, and you just deal with it. So yeah, and we've talked quite a lot about this, Zach, in previous interviews, of the people who have been leaders. We often forget about that in a mature market like the US or now places like Australia. And I think this is a great example of someone at that early stage of bringing Passive House to a place where it doesn't really exist at the moment.
No, it is hard work. I think it's interesting it is so unique in Japan. She was talking about the fact that mini splits have been around for 40 years there, and they've also dialed in hot water. I mean, hot water is a big deal, right, in domestic life in Japan, with the baths and the rice cooking daily, and all that stuff. So there are interesting ways where things might be easier. And then other ways where so kind of new challenges and different opportunities in Japan that I thought was really interesting. There's also a tradition of really fine craft, but maybe that's balanced by the fact that, we were talking about before the interview, the not necessarily really strong building regulations. So it's a really, really interesting mix.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that she mentioned just very briefly was that the government is pushing low energy buildings now, which is a shift. And I believe that's because of summer peak demands. That I know I read last summer that Japan was having problems with brownouts and blackouts because of the cooling peak demand. So I imagine it's probably related to that a little bit.
Yeah, like you say, Zach, we have a lot of mini splits available, and it gets warm. People are going to use those as air conditioners, as they do in Australia. And if you don't have the infrastructure to deal with that, then you do start to get summer peaks of electricity demand, similar to other places where they get winter peaks, and the grid can only cope with a certain amount of load. And in fact, some networks struggle even more in the heat because of what it does to wires and transmission and all sorts of infrastructure. So yeah, it is an interesting problem.
Also, really interesting grid challenges, I think, in Japan with after the Fukushima accident, a whole bunch of nuclear power going offline in Japan. And coal, lots of coal, and not necessarily a ton of room for lots of solar. So I imagine that buildings will be seen by climate solution makers as a really important piece of the puzzle in Japan.
Yeah. What's stood out for you, Ilka?
So interesting to hearing how you basically start over again, right? Like not starting over, but I just feel like a little bit put back in time when we started here in the US to just kind of educate people about passive house, because it's not just about reaching out to the builder or to the architect. It's also about getting banks on board, right? And just kind of explaining what is passive house. And I feel like that was a lot of work back then, a few years ago. And I feel like we finally got to a point where passive house is broadly acknowledged and known. And I feel like just hearing her talk, she has to start that now. And it's going to be a lot of work.
Even things like air tightness, which I'm glad you brought up, because I think you posed the question of what would be the average, and she didn't know. And that's a reasonable response, because if you ask the same person in Australia or New Zealand, they wouldn't know either, because, well, firstly, a lot of houses, you wouldn't even get them up to pressure to be able to measure them because they're that leaky that you couldn't do a blower door test on them. And secondly, if you did, there'd be so much variation that the average is almost meaningless, because there's this huge variety in accidental tightness, which is where buildings get more airtight without being designed that way, and then you end up with problems of lack of ventilation. Or you get really old houses with lightweight materials, as is common practice in Japan, lots of timber and other lighter materials, and just hasn't really been part of the methodology before. So it's no surprise really that you got buildings that have air change rates of 10 per hour or more, so very, very leaky buildings. I do have to ask about a comment. It was only a brief comment, I think you made, Ilka, where you said natural ventilation in regards to high air change rate. I would question whether I would probably call that infiltration rather than natural ventilation, but that's.
But where do you draw the line, Matthew?
Well,
where do you draw the line?
Yeah, I know some people who get quite passionate about that.
Fair enough.
It is an important point, though, because some people do think of a leakiness as ventilation, and the danger there is that if you rely on holes in the wall or gaps in the windows for ventilation, you don't know what you're bringing in with you in that air. It's not filtered, it's not controlled, and you also can't rely on it if it's a very still day. And I guess the other issue that was mentioned was high humidity. And if you've got just free airflow through the envelope of the building, however humid it is outside is all that's going to come inside as well. So right. some big challenges.
And I thought it was so interesting that she was talking about how people are used to having room by room conditioning. Mm-hmm. And so this whole passive house idea of having an airtight envelope of the entire building and then conditioning the whole building rather than room by room.
Yeah.
There's a huge shift to get used to right there.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the humidity? If you're doing room by room and you have a leaky house, well, then you can kind of handle it, I guess. But if you tighten up the envelope, then you need a whole house, a way of dealing with humidity on a whole house level.
Which is really tricky if you don't have a big roof void or an underfloor, or it's really hard to retrofit whole house ventilation. But it seems like retrofitting is not really the done thing. when the house that you built a few years ago was $200,000 and now it's worth 10% of that, that's different.
Kind of mind blowing.
Yeah. I mean, that that's quite something that, in particular here, we're used to the appreciation of property as being quite a fundamental part of the economy. So when that's not there, it changes the dynamic of real estate and building massively. And I can see pros and cons to both. I mean, obviously, it's a completely different environment, but it certainly sets up a different way of thinking about the longevity of houses.
Yeah, and especially because you mentioned before that there's a lot of craftsmanship in these houses, right? So it's not that it's just kind of something, easy and fast put up. I mean, she said that the builders are all very skilled, and just the detailing is quite important. So you would think that carries over into value, right?
Yeah, I guess it's a good point, and that's where the education comes in to where you take that craft and the skill and appreciate for what it is, but also try and direct it into other areas with educating about things like airtightness and thermal bridging and all those things that are going to contribute towards a passive house. Awesome stuff. Anything else from you, Mary, or to finish off with Ilka?
Well, again, going back to having different appliances, I appreciated that she brought up that kitchen ventilation is expected, and that they have hood systems that include makeup air, and that's just conventional, and that's still and it's still an approach that we struggle with here in the United States. So and yet it's so important to indoor air quality and health. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So perhaps learning can go both ways.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I was definitely impressed by the integrated kitchen makeup air.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, well, thank you once again, Ilka and Mary. Always a pleasure for these fantastic people that you bring to the show. It's great to see what particularly women are doing out there, but also in reaching in all parts of the world and different climates and different cultures. It's great to see what's going on out there. Speaking of which, Zach, what else is going on out there? It's a little bit of a quieter time of the year, despite some pretty big events going on around the world at the moment. But what have we got in passive house world?
Right, with the COP26 happening, we have I would call it a quiet week, somewhat quiet week, because we have had very intense weeks in the passive house world for the last several. Yeah. So this week at the Accelerator, we have Construction Tech Tuesday. So Wednesday, your time, we'll focus on a tiny mobile passive house office. This is an office in Bellingham, Washington, not that far from where I am right now, and it's the offices for Bundle Design Studio. So we'll be joined by Dan Welch, who will talk about this community-built project with salvage materials and cool passive house details all around this tiny little office space. It's going to be very fun.
Bundle's been on the podcast, right?
That's right. Yes, that's right. With an interview by Mary and Ilka.
Great interview. I've had quite a long dialogue with people on LinkedIn about the composting toilet in that office. It caused quite a lot of people were quite concerned about it. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah. Well, I was at the Bullitt Center for a while, working out of that living building, and I think that composting toilets were the most kind of anticipated piece of the building tour when anybody went on that tour. There were lots of curiosity about those things. So we'll learn more about that toilet on Tuesday. Okay, so then on the Global Passive House Showcase, which is Wednesday, our time, Thursday, your time, we will see the Willow Heights Passive House retrofit. So this is a retrofit of a historic building in Brooklyn. And this is a project of Michael Ingwies, who's the founder of the Passive House Accelerator and principal at Baxter Ingwe Architects. It's I was able to tour this project at the North American Passive House Networks conference earlier this year. It's super cool. and it should be a great program. And we'll have there's other stuff going on with other groups, and so we'll include links in the show notes to all that as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thanks for listening. And if you want to spread the word, then please do leave a comment, rating, or share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. Be great to spread wherever we are, wherever people are doing Passive House all around the world, as we've heard this week. And thank you, Ilka and Mary. Hopefully we'll have you back again next month for another awesome interview. And we'll be back again next week on the Passive House podcast.